mock riots as RAF Typhoons have been deployed?
Well, yeah, we're doing our bit. I'm not sure why they're flying over Turkey at the moment in relation to this attack, but I'm sure they know what they're doing. It's good that we are helping to defend a free country, keep itself safe.
And presumably, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, now the evacuation of Lebanon, which is already underway. David Lammy said earlier the time to leave is now. This will only heighten that situation.
I would think so. My own sense, though, is that the Israelis have limited objectives in Lebanon. The real issue comes from the fact that in 2006, after the last conflict with Hezbollah, Hezbollah agreed that it would withdraw north of the Litani River, which is well to the north of the border with Israel. They didn't do so. My sense is the Israelis are going to neutralize that area up to the Litani River, and then I think they'll think their war aims have been achieved.
And in terms of a wider war in the area, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, the Islamic Republic of Iran have made no secrets. In fact, they've given ample warning of the fact they want to annihilate Israel, wipe it out. They despise all it stands for. Might Israel welcome the opportunity to be able to deal with them once and for all?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you might as well deal with Iran and its axis of resistance while Iran is weak. Let's not forget that Israel does have its ultimate deterrent if things get really nasty. They're not going to use it unless they really have to, if its existence is threatened, I would suggest. But Iranian calculations always have to take that into account.
Okay, thank you, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, for your input. I'm now going to hand over to Michelle Dewberry. Of course, Dewbs & Co. is up next. I'll be back tomorrow 3 till 6. Here's Michelle Dewberry taking over.
Thank you very much for that, Martin Daubney. It is 6 o'clock. I am Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. We open the show tonight with the news that there has been a significant escalation now as Iran has apparently launched missiles into Israel. Let me cross live to our Home Affairs and Security editor, Mark White. Good evening to you. Please bring our viewers and listeners up to speed with the very latest.
Well, we had feared that there would be a response from Iran to what we've been witnessing in Lebanon over the last 2 weeks. And tonight we have that, with initial reports suggesting that 100 missiles have been fired from Iran towards Israel and are being intercepted as we speak. The very latest statement from the Israeli Defense Forces says that Iran's attack is continuing. You're requested to remain in a protected space until further notice. The explosions you are hearing are from interceptions or fallen projectiles. They go on to say the aerial defence array is currently identifying and intercepting launches. So listen, that's some positive news to report there, because the images that we and everyone else around the world were witnessing there was very worrying, very alarming. It looked like the Iron Dome missile and related missile defence systems over Tel Aviv, from the shots we could see, were exploding and taking out some, but then there were shots of clearly what looked like missiles coming and impacting on the ground. That is dangerous in itself. These Iron Dome and related missile systems, if they don't find a target, if they explode, there can still be casings and other things that come down that still have explosives in them, that still have the potential to cause some serious risk to people on the ground. But it seems from what the Israel Defense Forces are saying this evening is that they are intercepting all of these missiles that have been launched so far this evening in these first waves from Iran. What will, of course, still wait to be seen, really, is whether there are any other waves of missile attacks from the Iranian government, or whether that is it, whether they, from their point of view, have sent their message, have seemed to be doing something, and they are content to leave it at that. Then, of course, the all eyes will be on Israel as to what their response will be, and that will depend to a great degree on what the damage is. Israel reporting at the moment that they have been able to intercept these incoming missiles, but if there is significant damage on the ground, if there are casualties, then Israel will of course respond in kind to whatever that impact has been on their sovereign soil. We should also tell you about these images you're looking at. This is Jaffa on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, where a terrible terrorist attack has happened this evening. It seems that it was intended to coincide with the Iranian missile strike, and the Israeli government is reporting that 7 people have been killed. 4 people have been killed and 7 have been injured. 2 gunmen, 2 shooters have, according to the Israeli government, been neutralized. So by that we take it they mean shot and killed. I've got another breaking news line to bring you. This is doubling that number of missiles that have been launched from Iran. Now, according to Israeli army radio, nearly 200 missiles were launched into Israel from Iran. So initially we'd been reporting that 100 missiles had been launched from the regime in Tehran. Now Israeli army radio confirming that that number is doubled. Nearly 200 missiles launched from the Iranian government, and that would chime actually with what we witnessed live on air here on GB News. Not 1 but 2 waves of missiles coming in. The live shots over Tel Aviv that showed the Iron Dome missile defense system and those related aerial defense systems springing into action, first of all for one barrage of missiles, and then really about 15 minutes or so later back in action again, the sirens sounding in Tel Aviv as more missiles were intercepted. So we are clearly in unknown territory here, potentially, well, obviously a very dangerous situation. We await to see just how this situation will escalate or otherwise throughout the evening.
Mark White, thank you for that update, and worry not, we will be staying across this situation as it unfolds. These pictures, of course, are exactly the situation that Mark White was just explaining. But look, let me cross live to our political editor, Christopher Herb. He is with the Shadow Foreign Minister, Alicia Cairns. Good evening to you, Christopher Herb.
Hi, Michelle. Yeah, welcome to the Tory conference here at the ICC in Birmingham. With me now is Alicia Cairns, a former Foreign Affairs Committee chairperson, and now, of course, you're the Shadow Foreign Office Minister. What should the UK's reaction be to those images we're seeing on GB News live from Israel?
So our first priority should be helping protect Israel, making sure that none of those missiles land. We hear already that some have been intercepted over Jerusalem. That is good news. There have been warnings for about 2 or 3 hours that this may be coming our way. That's when I first picked it up. I can only hope that the UK and the US had intelligence far beyond that, so they've been able to pre-position some troops to be able to help. Obviously, the second priority is getting British nationals out. There are still thousands of British nationals across Lebanon. There's a flight tomorrow. Anyone there needs to get on that flight and leave, because it's only getting more dangerous. But also at home, we need to take note of what is happening. Over the last 24 hours, Hezbollah have said that they are now considering launching international terror cells around the world to harm friends of Israel. That does mean the UK. The Home Office is to make sure that we are making sure that what is taking place in the Middle East does not cause blood on our streets.
International terror cells brings this battle from our screens in Israel right to this country.
Absolutely. And look, this is something I've been warning of for a long time. There has been a risk that what is playing out in the Middle East would affect us. Hezbollah now, because they see themselves as being under threat of being eradicated, a terrorist group we want to see destroyed, who for a long time have hurt our soldiers in country and region. Now they are, of course, threatening this, and we should be deeply concerned.
We've heard from Joe Biden, the US president. He's saying that the US will step in to defend Israel. What should the UK do? Or we might find ourselves drawn into a Middle Eastern war.
Well, we should do the same as we did back in April, which is when the UK, Jordan, Saudi, the US and other countries stepped in and protected Israel from Iranian ballistic missiles. The difference here is that at that time, Iran gave us 3 or 4 days' notice they were going to launch this ballistic barrage at Israel. They haven't done that this time. Perhaps they've given enough notice privately that the UK and the US have then been, as I say, pre-position assets to be able to take them down. My concern is that that time hasn't taken. So there is a much greater risk this time that ballistic missiles could land on Israeli shores and hurt Israelis.
Well, we heard from Mark White there saying 200 missiles, according to the Israeli army, fired into Israel from Iran.
Yes, and far more were fired last time. So again, this is something at this moment we just don't know how much notice the UK and the US had, and of course the allies like Jordan and Saudi. We will have to wait, but yes, our priority should be making sure that no missiles land in Israel, because that is how we de-escalate the situation.
At what point do we say that a state of war exists between Iran and Israel?
It's an incredibly difficult one because essentially, yes, Iran and Israel have been for a long time in a state of warfare.
Low-level skirmishes.
Yeah, well, I'd say beyond that. I mean, look at Nasrallah, for example. What's fascinating about him is he's meant to be the kind of representative of, Iranian interests, but he's killed more Muslims than he has Jews. This is a really devastating and dangerous place to be. It's somewhere for the last 8-9 months we've been working very hard to prevent conflict getting into Lebanon, but we also need to see the defeat of Hezbollah. So this is a time where the world needs to come together, cool heads need to prevail, but the priority has to be preventing loss of life. At the moment, that is continuing to be a risk.
What do you do in your party? You're not in government anymore. You've got a Labour government. Are you full square behind them? Or are you getting briefings from them?
So our challenge, there are briefings that have been given to our party
on Privy Council terms.
On Privy Council terms, just as we did. It's really important the government keeps us updated because we need to work with them to challenge them to make sure that the right decisions are being made. This is a very tense moment. It's not about party politics. It's about protecting our allies and preventing conflict coming to our shores.
Parliament's back next week. Should it be recalled this week?
We will have to wait and see. We'll see what happens tonight. We'll see if they manage to stop the missiles from landing. But it may be that that is necessary, but we'll have to wait and see how the next 12 hours plays out.
It's risky. I mean, it's really, really... Yeah. I mean, you've been covering this space for years now. How do you rate the powder keg that is the Middle East right now?
It's probably, if I'm honest, it's probably the worst it's been in my entire time working on this, which is just over a decade. We should be incredibly concerned, but also let's hope that we are able to prevail and cool heads prevail.
And just people watching on might think, well, Israel they bombed parts of Lebanon, they hit the Hezbollah leadership. Does that explain what Iran are doing, do you think? Is that unfair to situation?
Iran likes to claim that they are not causing warfare within their region. They like to claim that they solely work from a defence posture. This is a retaliation for the murder of Nasrallah. Of course it is. But Nasrallah, as I said, is a terrorist who has killed both Muslim and Jewish people across the region. He has harmed UK interests. He will have taken British lives. He is someone that needs to be taken out. So yes, the Iranians are responding, and this is what they do. They take their time, they make their decision. What's interesting here is how quickly they've responded compared to April, and they've given us less notice than we had last time.
Just finally, going back to the UK, what's happening now in Whitehall? I mean, do you think there's a real risk here of some terror attacks in the UK?
I'm afraid there is a real risk, and the risk is because Hezbollah has purposely come out over the last 24 hours and said we are now going to move beyond our region and we will ignite attacks on those who are friends of Israel. That is us. It is a direct threat to us. Hezbollah clearly is feeling deeply under threat. Israel has been taking them out. They have been defeating and degrading the terrorist group. That benefits not just the UK, but all Arab neighbours, because let's be clear, Hezbollah is a terrorist group who hurts all around them. They work in no one's interest but their own. However, yes, when a dog is cornered, a bear is cornered, they attack, and now we have to make sure we protect our people.
And just finally, what do you want to hear from Sir Keir Starmer? He's due to go to Brussels this week. Yeah. We don't know when that's going to happen. He's meeting with the EU President von der Leyen. Yeah. Should that go ahead? Is it time to call a Cobra meeting? You mentioned Parliament. Yeah. What should the government be doing right now?
He should be holding an emergency Cobra this evening. It is of that importance. I'm hoping that potentially he was having intelligence briefings all this afternoon so we could see. We'll have to wait and see what found out. But as I said, the priority is stopping missiles landing in Israel, getting our people to safety, and then making sure that, yes, in the UK we are protected on our shores.
But to Brits in Lebanon who may be watching GB News, get out now.
Get out. We have been asking you to get out for months and months. There is a flight tomorrow. Be on that flight. Get on commercial flights.
Alicia Cairns there, Michelle, with some firm words there. I think if any Brits left in Lebanon, leave now.
Scary times. Christopher Herb, thank you very much for that. Alongside me, I've got Benedict Spence and Luciana Berger. Let me start with you. I mean, Israel is under attack tonight. How are you feeling right now?
Well, I'm sure it's, from the messages I've already received so far, absolutely terrifying for people in Israel today. Both the combination of the targeted terrorist attack and these indiscriminate rockets and missiles that are coming into Israel. We've seen them obviously just now on the screen. So far 200, but we know in terms of what happened just a few months ago when Iran launched this attack, a similar attack on Israel. It was over 400 missiles and attacks that happened at that time. It's absolutely terrifying. And I suppose the distinction here is that we're just seeing this indiscriminate firing of rockets and missiles at this time, which is in stark contrast to some of the events that we've seen over previous days and weeks.
And I will just tell you, if you are watching as opposed to listening on the radio, we are showing you live images of the skyline in Tel Aviv there. That is the images we're sharing. We've got also Mark White alongside us tonight, keeping fully abreast of that situation. Benedict Spence, this is a significant escalation.
It is. It's not unexpected. I mean, you know, the Israelis have been picking off just about everybody of importance in Hezbollah for the last couple of weeks. They've been doing it with impunity, and that is not only degradation of the logistics inside Hezbollah, it is a show of strength to the Iranians, to the other proxy groups around the region, saying we can infiltrate you very easily. We can get to you. We had that similar experience, didn't we, with the assassinations inside Iran earlier this year of senior Hamas members. So Iran needs to respond in some way, because it itself cannot be seen to its proxies around the region as being weak, or that it would abandon one of them, because there is a lot of perception in some of these groups that Hamas has been, if you like, almost left to the wolves, that actually Hezbollah did not go as hard as it could have done in the aftermath of October the 7th. So there needs to be that demonstration now that the Israelis are going in and are frankly pushing Hezbollah straight back over the Litani River, that actually Iran can stand up for its own organizations, because otherwise, if it can't do that, then what's to say that actually the Houthis or Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq actually still follow its orders? Actually, this is a very large, intricate web of organizations, and if Iran is seen to be abandoning not just Hamas but also Hezbollah, that won't last very long, and then a lot of its strength around the region will just disappear.
Look, this is an incredibly tense and rapidly escalating situation. Do you think enough has been done to try and de-escalate where we find ourselves today?
Well, and there's obviously lots of different ways in which we could address that question. I suppose the biggest challenge for Israel has been in the wake of the greatest attack on Jews since the Second World War on October the 7th.
Just 1 second, just to explain on this screen, as I just explained, what you're seeing, this is moments ago, this was the missile attacks live there over the skyline of Tel Aviv. Sorry, Lucy.
No, of course, and it's important for your viewers and listeners that they understand what is happening at the moment in Tel Aviv. It's a city, it's a modern, pluralistic city of people of all different faiths and none that's currently under attack, and we're seeing on our screens the devastating images of indiscriminate rocket and missile attacks on the residents and people of that area, and in particular here, in addition, the targeted attack in Jaffa. Jaffa is, if anyone that's been to the region will know, I was there just a few months ago, it's a very multicultural area. It's got lots of people of all different faiths, not just Jewish, Muslim residents as well, and to hear that that's an area that's been targeted is, particularly disturbing today. But I think, we've seen since, for any country, on October the 7th, we saw Hamas go into Israel and indiscriminately kill over 1,200 people. It was the greatest attack and death of Jews since the Second World War. And since then, we've seen Iran launch, it's not just at this moment, Iran launched missiles, over 400 of them at Israel back in March. And we've seen Israel rightly retaliate. We've seen people displaced across Israel as a result of attacks from Hezbollah. And obviously these organizations, Hamas and Hezbollah, as you've just heard, are proxies of Iran. Iran has, taken this course of action, and I sincerely hope that the Iron Dome, which is a piece of defence mechanism that Israel has that protects the country, will ensure that none of those missiles actually fall and maim and kill. But obviously we've seen from our screen some pretty disturbing pictures.
It's very disturbing. I mean, I do need to kind of put to you, there'll be some people watching this unfold tonight. And I know you mentioned, understandably so, the appalling, horrific terrorist act on October the 7th. Some people watching that, watching this programme today will be saying to their screens, but hold on a second, because people that support Palestinian causes would push back and say, but the story began prior to October the 7th. And they would actually try and justify, because I've had it on this programme when people have come on, and they would try and justify the acts of Hamas. They would say that Hamas were trying to push back and free their people. What would you say to that?
Well, I don't accept that at all. I accept, I think for any sovereign nation to have, and within Israel's own borders, there's 2 million Muslims that live within Israel as well. To have people that cross that border and indiscriminately kill over 1,200 people, we wouldn't tolerate that in this country, and no sovereign nation would tolerate that sort of attack. Of course, it's going to prompt a response in order to extract what is a terrorist organisation, Hamas, backed by Iran, that has continued to kill with impunity. And not just Hamas, we've seen it from Hezbollah as well. The attacks that we've seen from Hezbollah in the north of Israel have got nothing to do with Hamas and Gaza. That's a completely separate entity, also backed by Iran. That has resulted in over 60,000 people being displaced from their homes in the north of Israel. Again, not something in this country we would tolerate. If 60,000 people were told they had to, leave their homes, and that's exactly what has happened in the wake of October the 7th. Again, as a sovereign nation, we would take action against that, and I think it's absolutely right that Israel has done so.
I will cross live in a second to Mark White, but before I do that, Benedict Spence.
The Palestinian people keep on being sold lies, which is that if you continue to attack your bigger, stronger neighbour and you lose, eventually you'll get what you want. Germany found this out the hard way throughout the last century. If you keep on going to war against your enemies and you keep on losing, they will keep taking parts of your territory, and your lot in life will get worse. Sooner or later, a sensible society is supposed to recognise that this is not smart. The Palestinians are the only ones who are told by their allies, who are not really their friends at all, no, you keep doing this and this will be fine. Israel has actually been very magnanimous when it's taken territory from other countries. It gave back all of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt on the promise of recognition and peace. It would do so with the Golan Heights, you'd imagine, if the Syrian government were to do something similar. It could be occupying Lebanon right now. It's invaded before. It's left. It doesn't want to do that, but ultimately it has a right to its own defence. It is a country. It is not a Western country in that sense. It is a Middle Eastern country, and it has learned the hard way over and over again. If you want to maintain a pluralistic democracy, that comes with strength, and that is what it is doing, and it is what any Western country would demand of their own governments. If there were Mexican cartels firing missiles into the United States, nobody would expect the United States to withhold itself and not send troops into that area. This is effectively the same thing, and it is only Israel that gets told by Western countries, no, you have to just sort of suck it up and take it and let it happen.
Well, if you are just joining us here on Dewbs & Co, here on GB News, the big breaking news of the evening is that Israel is coming under significant attack. Now, I want to cross live back to our home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, since you and I last spoke, Christopher Hope, he has just been interviewing the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Alicia Cairns. She's just said, and it will be concerning to lots of our viewers, she was saying that this has increased, in her view, the risk of a terrorist attack in the UK. What's your response to that?
I think she is absolutely right. Remember that Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah and others, have extremists in the UK and all around the world that could well be waiting, if not to attack UK citizens directly, then potentially Israeli interests or Western government interests in the UK and other countries as well. Don't forget that Iran stands accused of plotting the murder of individuals who've been working for a free Iranian TV channel out of London, and that channel required very significant armed police guards for a significant amount of time, and still to this day there are a number of protocols in place to protect these. One reporter was actually stabbed outside his home in London. So there are some real concerns in the UK and elsewhere about the potential for what they would see as reprisals. And in Tel Aviv tonight, that is playing out on the streets of the Israeli city with at least one terrorist attack in which we're told 4 people have been killed and 7 others have been injured after 2 gunmen were near a railway station on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, firing indiscriminately or targeting civilians in that area. Now, we are getting reports this from Reuters about Israeli police saying they're concerned about the potential or about another terrorist attack at a Tel Aviv hotel. Now, what we don't know at this stage is whether they mean by that a terrorist attack is actually underway at that hotel, or whether they have intelligence to support a potential attack taking place at a hotel in Tel Aviv tonight. So I'm still just head down here trying to gather more in the way of information, but the attacks that were launched by the Iranian regime were directed by the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. He has, we're told, been taken to a secure location where he has been for a number of days, and the Iranian regime have said that they will respond with very significant force if there are any reprisals from Israel to this missile launch this evening.
Mark White, I know you are going to stay with us for the duration of this programme, so we will be, of course, keeping a close eye on the situation. But for now, thank you very much. I mean, Luciana, what do you think should be the UK response to all of this?
Well, I do think that we know in this country, in the wake of any events of war or attacks in the Middle East, that we do see things happening in the UK, and we talk about what might happen.
You had me up in the box.
We've already seen in this country a 41% increase in the incidence of anti-Jewish hatred and anti-Semitism in the wake of the October 7th attack. And just this afternoon, I was in northwest London. We're preparing for the High Holy Days, the big religious days coming up, starting at the end of this week. And the security measures already being put in place are unprecedented, unlike I've ever seen. I've just seen the roadblocks, the plastic roadblocks go up around Jewish places of worship that I've never seen in my lifetime, and I know that's as a direct result. An organisation that works here in the UK, the Community Security Trust, has put out warnings to lots of Jewish communal organisations to be alert and to be aware in the run-up to the High Holy Days.
Do you feel safe in the UK at the moment?
I have had moments, unfortunately, throughout my life as in public life and in public office where I haven't been safe because I've been the target of attacks from all different groups, so far right, far left, and other groups as well. So I appreciate that my experience is very distinct and different from others by way of the fact, I've seen 6 people convicted, I've seen 4 people go to prison for the anti-Jewish hatred that they've directed towards me. So I don't think I'm a good example. I think certainly, though, speaking as I do to mums and dads,
colleagues, friends,
absolutely. I think that certainly everyone knows someone who's been impacted in some way in the wake of the October the 7th attack. So if it's not them directly, it's friends, it's family, it's children that go to school, it's someone from a school community. It has really, I think, impacted in a way that it's very difficult to explain to people in kind of the wider community, because if you haven't seen it or you haven't been part of it, then why would you know about it? But certainly it's unlike anything I've ever experienced in my lifetime in this country.
So you say that many people won't be able to connect to the experience that you're describing. Help them understand, what is it like? You talk about children, for example, schools, security measures. What is it like?
Well, I think most people won't know that every single Jewish school in this country has security. So my children go to a Jewish school and there is full-time security for the time that children go into school for the entirety of the school day and at the end of the day. And certainly when I've had non-Jewish friends come with me to pick up my kids, they're surprised by the presence of security guards and very, very tight security. It's not just Jewish schools, it's Jewish places of worship, Jewish community centres, places for older people to come together. Security is absolutely paramount because we know, unfortunately, unfortunately, there are experiences, not just in this country, but in France, just the country next door, where people have been killed in schools and murdered for the very fact that they're Jewish.
And the security that what we're talking about right now, is this kind of a recent thing post-October the 7th? Was it previously like that? Has it got worse, or,
We've always had security around Jewish communal buildings because there's been so many examples over the decades of Jewish places of worship and Jewish community centres being targeted. You can look through in South America, it's happened on a number of different occasions across Europe, particularly in Paris, for example. And so there's been examples of where people have received things in the post. So we've always had to remain alert as a community, but certainly there is a massive correlation, and the data that's been collected now for over 25 years in this country shows that when events happen in the Middle East, they spill over, unfortunately and regrettably, into this country. And just in this past 6 months alone, we've seen this 41% increase in anti-Semitic incidents.
Benedict Spence, what do you make to some of what Luciana's describing?
The mark of, especially in the sort of the post-Holocaust Europe, I think the mark of how successfully a European country is doing is how it treats its Jewish community. And I think we have begun to lose sight of this continent's rather troubled past of anti-Semitism. And the fact of the matter is that with multiculturalism and an attempt to sort of placate different communities, many of which are not in fact Middle Eastern, that we have lost sight of the fact that a lot of anti-Semitism has been imported into this country. And that's not all from that. There is obviously a far-right element here, homegrown in this country as well, but there is a lot of it, and we've not paid attention to it. And I think the biggest example of that is going to be that in the wake of this attack, and of course the October the 7th attacks last year, this weekend will be the anniversary of that, the anniversary of Jewish men, women and children being murdered in their homes. And what do we think is going to happen? There will be thousands of people marching through London and other cities against Israel, against those people. And actually there will be examples of anti-Semitism on those marches, because there always are. And it tends to be people who just take the opinion that, well, the average police officer doesn't speak Arabic, so they don't know what the chants mean, but some of us do, and we understand what's going on. That, in fact, has been the response to this pogrom of Jewish people, has been the tolerance of protests which are effectively calling for the destruction of a democracy under the guise of multiculturalism or freedom of expression. Yes, we all understand that the situation is very complex, but actually it massively indulges anti-Semitism. It shouldn't be tolerated, but it's going to happen anyway. What this country should be doing...
Would you be suggesting, for example, because there will be people watching this programme that are listening to you, and you're talking about these protests that we've seen, all the rest of it, they will say, some of the people that go and attend these protests, they will say that they're not anti-Semitic. What they're trying to do is they are just normal people horrified by the images of children being orphaned, maimed and all the rest of it, and they want the fighting to stop. So many people on those marches would push back against the suggestion that they're somehow anti-Semitic and so on.
Well, of course, they're not going to stand up there and say, yes, it's anti-Semitic, because then they might be arrested. That would be a really silly thing for them to do. But ultimately, again, it's the double standard at play here. They started the protests the very day that the attack on Israel happened, when we knew about Israeli children being raped and murdered and Israeli women being raped and murdered. It was then the protests automatically against Israel. There had been no military activity in Gaza at that point. And if people then want to talk about occupations and going back through history, I take us all the way back to the formation of the State of Israel. The Israelis accepted the terms, which was that they would get less than a quarter of the land, and the Arabs, as it was then, not the Palestinians, the Arabs said, absolutely not, we're going to drive these people into the sea, and they lost. And then they lost again, and they kept losing. And I'm sorry, but at some point you have to turn around to these people and say, if your solution to this, the fact that you don't like the existence of a Jewish state, is violence and more violence until you get your way, you can't actually be upset if the Jewish state then turns around and goes, well, we're going to visit you with violence as well, because this is how we're going to protect ourselves.
I mean, I imagine there'll be very strong feelings, emotions among you guys at home tonight as well. You can get in touch and join this conversation. All the usual ways, gbviews@gbnews.com is how you can email me, or of course you can go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay, or you can tweet or X me. Get in touch with me tonight. Let me know your reactions to this significant escalation that we are seeing now. Essentially, Israel is under attack. Now, let me cross live to defence analyst James Marler. James, you were in Israel last week. Can you tell me, what's your response to this significant escalation today?
Well, I've been there for the last few weeks, and sadly, I came back just before the weekend, as you say. I say sadly because at times like this, you like to be there. I've just been on the phone to a number of people. This all started to unfold about an hour ago because I got word as I was speaking to somebody in Jerusalem and then somebody just before then in the south of Israel. Then we got word that there was an attack, a terrorist attack in the city of Jaffa, which is very close to Tel Aviv. At the moment, I'm not sure if you're getting that feed through, but there was a terrorist, we were told, that had shot at least 10 people. 4 of them were in serious condition. Police and border police were running to that scene. So were other journalists as well, also heading towards Jaffa. And then it was about 10 minutes later when I was speaking to somebody else that all of a sudden it flashed up on my screen of a major attack from some type of rockets coming, which I originally assumed was coming from Lebanon, and this was going towards Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And then it was quite clear that it wasn't Lebanon, it wasn't Hezbollah, it was coming from Iran. And this is clearly a major sustained attack, which we've not seen for many, many decades, perhaps not since the 1973 war, simply because that the sirens went off across the country, literally from the north to the south, from the east to the west. Jerusalem and Tel Aviv were specifically hit in terms of these ballistic and cruise missiles. What I'm hearing as I monitor some of the Israeli news, and I've also just spoken to 2 other people in between taking calls from GBNews, is that there's around, so far, more than 200 cruise and ballistic rockets that have been fired into civilian areas in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. Now, the Israeli defense system is called the Arrow, not the Iron Dome, not David Sling. Iron Dome picks up short-range missiles. David Sling picks up the medium range. But any missile which is coming in, or rocket that is coming in from Yemen or Iran or Iraq or anywhere like that, that is known as the Arrow system, picking out long-range rockets coming in. At this point, of course, nobody knows what has happened. A good friend of mine I was just speaking to was on his way to he'd come from the Western Wall in Jerusalem because tomorrow night is the start of the 10 days of the High Holy Days, the Jewish New Year and Yom Kippur. So he was coming from the Western Wall, and all of a sudden, he looked up at the sky, he tells me, and he just saw, I've never seen anything like it. He says there was missiles coming across. We actually had to run for cover. And that's the problem right now, because a lot of people were out shopping and preparing for the Jewish New Year. A lot of food, because it's a 3-day holiday, and all the shops will be closed, and they were out in the open. So when you're out in the open, there's no safe room to go. There's no bunker. There's no shelter. There's no safe room in your house. You've literally got to go to somewhere at the side of a wall, or even by somewhere where if a missile comes down, you're protected at least from that wall. That's what is happening at the moment. The sirens are still going off. We don't know what's happening on the ground. But of course, once the dust settles, we will find out what the casualty figure is likely to be. And then I expect that Israel is going to respond, and they will respond in a very, very strong way.
You about that. You are a defence analyst. What do you think should happen next?
Is that question directly to me? Because it cut out.
Yeah, I'm just asking you, what's, in your view, what should happen next? Is there a way, do you think, to try and de-escalate this entire situation or not?
Well, I don't think you can de-escalate it once Israel has been attacked by Iran with over 200, and perhaps we'll find out the exact number, but the IDF is saying right now it's more than 200 cruise missiles and ballistic missiles across, as I said, mentioned earlier on, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, the main population cities. It's also hit the south and, of course, in the north. People have moved from the north to Tel Aviv and other areas to get away from the rockets which were coming from Hezbollah. From Iran's point of view, Iran says they are retaliating for the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, and also, of course, Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. Their main proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, were the main proxies against Israel. And the Iranian regime uses them as a form of protection against the Iranian regime. Now that Hezbollah, a lot of their people have been taken out, certainly the military hierarchy have been taken out, don't be fooled. No one should be fooled. Hezbollah is still very, very strong. It's still got its major capabilities. But and specifically, if it does, again, get involved against Israel with Iran, it can get its supply routes directly from Iran via Syria to Lebanon, which will supply more long-range missiles that Hezbollah can fire in towards Israel. But in terms of what happens right now, well, as I said, I believe that Israel is going to hit back. How hard will they hit back depends upon if there's any casualties as to what is taking place on the ground. But there's never been anything like this, I don't think, since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, which pretty much happened exactly at this time in 1973. Simply in terms of sirens, and that the entire country was literally under attack.
And in terms of the UK specifically, what do you think the UK's next step should be here?
Well, it'll be interesting to hear what the Prime Minister Keir Starmer will say. It'll be interesting to hear what President Biden is saying. Again, hearing from Israeli television that the Americans are monitoring the situation very, very closely. The difference between this attack, this Iranian attack, and the attack that took place on April the 14th, is that you pretty much knew. Are we still here? I think we might have lost it. We might have lost it here.
No. OK, sorry. I do think we did. We had him, and then unfortunately, I do just think we did then just lose him towards the end of that. Of course, that was the defence analyst James Marlow giving his view on the situation there. There's a significant escalation when it comes to Israel essentially being under attack. I can cross live now to Dan Feverman, a Middle East analyst at Tel Aviv as we speak. Good evening to you.
We've had better evenings here, but good evening to you.
Dan, describe the situation where you are right now.
Sure. I live in central Israel. I was actually on my way to a wedding. And of course, tomorrow night is the Jewish New Year, one of the holiest days in the year. And as we have unfortunately become used to the last year and really the last 20 years, barrage of rockets, missiles, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles fired from Iran. Everyone heads to the bomb shelters or the stairwell in their home. And over the course of an hour, it is reported, at least last update I saw, that some 500 Iranian missiles and rockets and cruise missiles were fired literally at all of Israel. Thankfully, the interceptors got all, if not most of them. And you can still feel the buildings shaking as you can see in the picture. That's what it looks like. The buildings are shaking from the booms. And of course, we have to stay in the shelter because even the shrapnel and the intercepted missile bodies really can still cause a lot of damage and death and destruction. So it is quite harrowing as this happens.
Goodness me. Dan, thank you for sharing your perspective there, and do stay safe. I mean, it's quite shocking to hear, isn't it?
It is, and I saw someone had circulated the picture. There's an app that's used in Israel when they get warnings for like certain areas, and to see the entire country have the red alert, there'll be hundreds of thousands of people who are currently sat in a shelter or having to go into the safest place in their building in order to protect themselves. And it's, as we've heard, while a number of those missiles have been intercepted, it's the after effects. It's what happens to the buildings during the course of that. It's what happens when them shaking, and it's the shrapnel as well. So this will carry on. And as you've heard, this is a very particularly poignant part of the year for particularly Israel this time. We're going into the High Holy Days. It's the Jewish New Year, which sounds like a celebration. It is, but it's also a kind of the second holiest day within the Jewish calendar. It's a very significant time, and obviously even more impactful that people won't be able to go about their daily lives and will be very concerned about family and friends at this time.
And expense?
And it's just the fact that no society should have to exist where bomb shelters are sort of built into the structural design of residential areas. And this is the reality for so many Israelis on a day-to-day basis. The only other country that I can think of sort of in the, well, it's in the Western world that has a similar sort of thing is Finland, because it had to do that because it was on the doorstep of the Soviet Union. It's not something that people should take for granted or as normal, and it does inform I think, Israel's domestic outlook on the rest of the world, and it is a constant reminder that it is in a state of existential threat. There's been a lot of progress in the last few years. You know, it's one of the few sort of triumphs of the Trump administration was the Abraham Accords, getting some Arab countries to recognise Israel, to actually come to the table and recognise that peace was the way forward, that it doesn't have to be a perpetual state of war. And, you know, that's the United Arab Emirates, that's Bahrain. At some point, there will probably be a deal with Saudi Arabia as well. There is a critical mass of countries in the region coming in that direction. But for the time being, children are still growing up under the threat of rocket assault. And they were doing that before October 7th as well. And that's the thing that we have to remember. As much as people say there's two sides to the story and it's an ongoing thing, it's been an ongoing thing for Israelis since their state was founded.
Yeah, I've got to say, one of my viewers, Christopher, in fact, actually in Cardiff, he's got in touch and said, Michelle, why doesn't there seem to be the same amount of outrage for the civilians, he's asking, of Palestine in particularly? He's asking the children that are being there. Let me cross live back to GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Good evening, Mark. What has developed since we last spoke?
Well, after two waves of missile attacks targeting Israel direct from the Iranian regime, it now seems that the Israeli government has assessed that those attacks, for the moment at least, are over. It's now instructing those citizens, and this is incredible to think, it just shows you how normalised this kind of attack is now in that part of the world, where just less than an hour after these missiles have come across, people in the region, in Israel, are being told they can leave the shelters. They've got to stay relatively close to areas of protection so they can get back into the shelters quickly. But for the time being, they're allowed to leave those air raid shelters as they think that the two waves of missiles, nearly 200 missiles fired by the regime in Tehran, are now over for the time being. We have hopefully we can show you some incredible footage that has come in that shows missiles raining down on Israeli territory. And in viewing the images before, it looked very alarming indeed that this was central Tel Aviv coming under attack. But actually, according to the Israeli government, many of the missiles were intercepted. But the way that the aerial defence array operates, it's so sophisticated that if a missile, ballistic missile or drone is coming in, and they assess through this defence missile array system that it is not going to impact on a populated area, in other words, it's going to come down in open space, then the Iron Dome missile system does not take that missile out, because it wants to save the missiles, its own iron defence missiles, that it might need to deal with other aerial threats. So it allows these ballistic missiles to come down and to impact in open space. So I think that's what we were seeing with these multiple images of explosions taking place on the ground. And we believe that one of the areas that was attacked was the Nevatim air base, which is in the Negev desert, and areas around the Negev desert. If there was impacts there, the Iron Dome system was allowing those missiles to come through. But a very significant escalation from the Iranian government in launching these missiles into Israeli airspace this evening. The vast majority of them intercepted, others falling in open space, Michelle.
Let me ask you this, Mark, because a lot of viewers are getting in touch tonight, obviously sharing their reaction to this, but there's a sentiment that seems to be a question, if you like, that seems to be getting posed by a lot of different viewers. They're asking, are we teetering on the edge of World War III? What do you think to that?
Well, I think that's a bit of a stretch at this time, but we're certainly in a very dangerous situation in terms of the potential for a regional war. So more sides than just Israel against Hamas, Israel against Hezbollah. I mean, in a sense, of course, they're already fighting with Iran because these are proxies of Iran. And what we mean by proxies is these are terrorist groups that are funded, trained and equipped by Iran to project Iran's influence, often in a malign way, in that part of the Middle East. So in that sense, yes, they are at war, even though the two governments really have not exchanged fire really between each other until April of this year, when Iran responded to what they said was the Israeli military killing two of their generals in the Syrian capital, Damascus. And then we saw that very significant response from Iran of missiles and drones going into Israel. Israel responded in kind, but then they effectively called it quits and moved on. But now, of course, all bets are off really as to what exactly will happen. There will be an Israeli response. There has to be. But it depends on what that response is and whether it's a response that Iran can tolerate without then feeling that it needs to escalate and go even bigger in responding to what Israel has done in a sort of tit-for-tat escalation that would be very damaging indeed. And understandably, Michelle, people right across the UK and elsewhere in the Western Hemisphere are maybe thinking it's a faraway war. Why do we even care? Well, we should care because, for instance, today a commercial ship in the Red Sea was targeted with a missile from another Iranian group, the Houthis, in Yemen. And that's meant that much of our commercial shipping is not going through the Suez Canal as it normally would. It's going right round Africa and adding many, many thousands of pounds extra to the costs of transporting fuel and goods to the UK and other countries. That has an inflationary impact on our country with these prices going up all the time. There's the oil price, which will surely rise significantly now as well. That means fuel prices are going up, and those commodities that rely on petroleum products will go up as well in price. And then, of course, you've got the refugee situation or the asylum seekers coming to the UK. We've seen after wars in Iraq and in Syria and Afghanistan, those represented on the northern shores of France trying to get in small boats. The majority are from these countries. So we can potentially expect, if this escalates to a regional war, many more people on the move and heading to what they deem as safer Western countries. So very significant potential impacts to people back home here in the UK. And that's not to mention what we were discussing before, Michelle, about the potential, the very real risk of terrorist incidents happening in countries across the West. We've already seen that in response to what's been happening in Gaza.
Not quite a very concerning situation. Let me just ask, has there been any reaction yet from the Prime Minister or from David Lammy?
I haven't seen a response yet from the UK Prime Minister, but it's possible I've just missed that. We've certainly had a response from the US government saying that they're there, that the US President Joe Biden has directed his forces to protect Israel in terms of missiles coming over. That doesn't mean that they'll join in any offensive action against Iran. That we wait to see what happens there. But certainly in protecting Israel from the missiles coming over, the US have been involved in shooting the missiles down, as has Jordan, and we think potentially, Michelle, that UK warplanes, we know they've been up over Turkish airspace with a refuelling tanker.
Mark White, very concerning stuff. Thank you for that update. Benedict Spence, your closing thoughts on all this?
I mean, it's obviously a very harrowing thing to have to witness and to see the escalation that's happening in the Middle East. But now I suppose it's a question of what is going to be the scale of the retaliation. What is Israel's appetite for a broader conflict? What does it ascertain? What does it gamble on? What does it think that Iran will do if there is a major escalation? Because we've got to take away from all of this is that there is still a ground offensive going on in Lebanon. It can't be distracted from that target. Iran is too far away and too big for any sort of direct military intervention. But there are things that can be done, and you wouldn't be surprised to see in the next couple of days, weeks, moves made against part of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, as we've seen before, and maybe its oil infrastructure as well. That is the thing that would hurt it the most financially.
Luciana Berger, your final thoughts?
Well, I sincerely hope that what we've just heard is true, that is the end of it. We've heard different reports over the course of the last hour, unclear whether it's 200 missiles, anything up to 500 missiles, as we heard from the contributors speaking directly from a shelter. Let's hope that's the end of it. And I sincerely hope that it's true that they've all been intercepted. I mean, we saw on our screens what looked like one or two falling onto ground, but let's hope that they're intercepted, because by way of interception, I think that in part goes some way to minimising the situation and to ensuring that the retaliation is contained, and first and foremost, of course, to minimise any sort of destruction to what has been the indiscriminate attacks that we've seen on our screen on densely populated Israeli civilian areas. I think that's the big distinction that we've seen today, and I sincerely hope that there won't be casualties, and therefore in terms of what happens next, that will be minimised.
I mean, this is, of course, significant escalation, and one that we will be closely following here on GB News. But for now, to my panel, thank you for your company. Thank you to each of you at home as well. But don't go anywhere. The conversation continues after the break.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. On the M18 in South Yorkshire, the northbound exit is partly blocked junction 3 at St Catherine's, so of course just south of Doncaster where a car has broken down. Long delays on the M5 northbound through Gloucestershire after a crash blocked the motorway momentarily from the Tewkesbury exit and the M50. All lanes are back open, but it's taking about an hour and a half in the queues back to junction 10 north of Cheltenham. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, the motorway is down to a single lane anti-clockwise. Recovery works underway in the Holmesdale tunnel following an accident. Long queues bound into Essex to the M11, and in East Sussex the A267 is closed northwest of Heathfield, and Cross and Hand investigation works underway following an accident. Also in West Sussex, just over the border west of Bolney, the A272 closed off the A23 at Bolney Cross following a multi-vehicle collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We love making our audience big cash winners, and you really could be next. With £36,000 tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the call about that.
Angela, you've won £30,000.
£30,000 cash?
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News.